All right, we are moving into Genesis chapter 4, and I know that you have a lot of videos to watch this week. Pressing on your time, I will make it up to you next week, but we need to get through these first 4 chapters of Genesis. So let me go ahead and start reading Genesis 4:1. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. By the way, notice they're outside the garden, but the Lord is with her. And the consequences for the sin was that childbirth will be painful, but who's with her in the painful childbirth? With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. I have gotten a man. Verse 2, and again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. But the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, will not you be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Its desire is for you. Remember the line about the woman and the man, you will desire your man, but he will rule you. Same words here. Its desire is for you, but you must rule it. So power struggle. Now I want you to see the structure. This is called a chiasm. So Cain was born, Abel was born. Abel is a keeper of the flocks. Cain is a farmer. This goes back and forth all the way through Cain, Abel, Abel, Cain, Cain, Abel, Abel, Cain. And so it's a chiastic structure, this back and forthness. It's called a chiasm or chiastic structure because it mirrors the Greek letter chi. And so what this structure does, it does a couple things. One, it makes it easier to remember the story. Cain was born, Abel was born. Abel was a shepherd, Cain was a farmer. Cain brought some of his fruits. Abel brought his firstborn, the fat of his flock. Abel's offering was received, Cain's offering wasn't, and then we get the conversation between the Lord and Cain. So the structure makes it easier to remember the story and to tell the story. But also what the structure does is it highlights the rivalry between the brothers. So Cain and then Abel, Abel and then Cain, Cain then Abel, Abel then Cain. And so that back and forth feeds into the story of this rivalry and this jealousy between the brothers, or at least that Cain has for Abel. And so it feeds into that. And of course, where this thing goes is that Abel's offering is accepted and Cain's is not. And so question might arise, what was wrong with Cain's offering that the Lord God did not accept his offering? Well, there's a few responses to this. Let me go ahead and identify them to you. So the number one response is that Cain's offering, I should put it up here, Cain's offering not accepted. Okay, and the question is why? So one response is, and this is the number one response, is that Cain is about the quality. So it's about the quality of the offering, that he only gave some of the produce of the ground. He didn't bring the first fruits, he didn't bring a tithe, he just brought some. In contrast to Abel, who brought the firstborn from his flock, the fat of his flock, it's like he's bringing his best. And Cain is just bringing kind of a low quality offering, some of his offering, some of his harvest. Okay, and the reason why we would argue this is because the narrator highlights the quality of Abel's offering. Highlights that Abel just didn't bring some of his flock, he brought the firstborn, he brought the fat of his flock. And so because the narrator highlights the quality of Abel's offering and basically says nothing about Cain's offering, that he just gave some, then that becomes the reason why the Lord God did not receive Cain's offering. Okay, that's probably the number one response you'll find out there. Okay, a second response is that there's really no reason. Okay, that's just how life is. You know, sometimes God smiles on you, sometimes God smiles on someone else and not on you. And then the question becomes, well, what do you do when God's smiling on someone else but not me? Okay, and so from this vantage point, God's just kind of capricious. Sometimes he'll accept your offering, sometimes not. What do you do when he doesn't accept your offering? Okay, I don't buy number two. You'll find it out there, but I don't buy number two because the narrator highlights the quality of Abel's offering. If the narrator didn't take the time to highlight the quality of Abel's offering and just said Abel brought some, then okay, maybe I'd go for this one. But because of the work of the narrator in highlighting the high quality of Abel's offering and then says nothing about Cain's offering, I don't buy this, okay? I think there is a reason why Cain's offering is not accepted. And it's not about just what do you do when God smiles on someone else. Okay, the other reason I don't take this one is God says, Cain, if you do what is right, won't you too be accepted? And so clearly, Cain needs to do something. Okay, number three, again, you'll find this one out here, is that God favors shepherds over farmers. So some would give this kind of a social reading. This story is told to show that God favors shepherds over farmers. God's not impressed with farmers, but God is impressed with shepherds, those who have flocks. Again, don't really buy this one because of, again, the narrator's highlighting of the quality and then where we're going in terms of God's response to Cain. Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, won't you too be accepted? It's not like Cain has flocks. He can go do what's right and bring flocks. He's not a shepherd. So there must be something that Cain can do besides become a shepherd. Okay, number four. And this is, I think, the real reason why the offering is not right. Cain isn't right. See, it's not so much that there was something wrong with Cain as much as there was, it's not so much that there was something wrong with Cain's offering, so much as there was something wrong with Cain. There's something in his heart. God sees the heart. It's not about what you bring, it's about the heart that you're bringing it with. And so notice, if we read it kind of closely, you know, I'm looking at verse 6. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry and why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? It's not if you do well, will not your offering be accepted? It's about Cain being accepted. If you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, its desire is for you, you must rule over it. See, God's not really all about the offering per se, God's about the person. And the giving of the offering, that is symbolic of what the person is giving. And so it's not simply that Cain is not giving, you know, his best crops or his tithe or first fruits. Cain's really not giving himself to God. And whereas Abel is. And so to me, that's kind of the bottom line of this thing, that Cain is withholding himself from God. And in withholding himself from God and then seeing someone else giving themselves to God and being accepted, Cain becomes incredibly jealous and angry about things. Well, look what else goes on. Verse 8, Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel, your brother? I mean, God knows, right? So where is Abel, your brother? Why does God ask the question? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me. Then the Lord said to him, not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, and they built a city, etc. Okay, so there's a couple things with this. One, we see that questioning Lord God again. Cain, where's your brother Abel? I don't know, am I my brother's keeper? Why does God ask the question? He wants Cain to come out in the open. He wants Cain to confess, to own up, to get right. So God is asking questions, kind of searching again. Second thing I want you to notice is the blood of Abel is crying out to God. And so maybe Cain, in a sense, has gotten rid of Abel, but he can't silence Abel. That blood of Abel cries out to the Lord God from the ground. The Lord God hears the blood crying out. Third thing to notice, at the end of Genesis 3, we saw that the ground was cursed because of Adam and Eve's sins. Now we see the ground is cursing Cain because Cain polluted the ground with innocent blood. Now the ground is cursing at Cain, and he becomes a wanderer, a fugitive. And so we see that. Cain is fearful that somebody's going to find him and kill him, pay him back for what he did to Abel, and that he can't bear that. And the Lord God says, not so. I'll put some type of mark on you so that whoever sees you, nobody will kill you. I don't know who he's worried is going to kill him, whether he's thinking in terms of, is his father going to kill him? They're going to have more children. Adam and Eve are. Maybe he's afraid that they'll hear about what he did and they'll kill him. Don't know where he got his wife. Maybe that's a sister, all different kinds of theories on that. So some would say possibly that Adam and Eve had more children, and so he marries a sister, that becomes his wife. Others would say that Adam and Eve are symbolic, if you will, representative of the human race. God didn't just start with two, that God started with a pool of humanity. And the story of Adam and Eve is representative or symbolic of the whole pool of humanity. And from that pool, Cain takes a wife. And he's worried that they'll hear about what he did and they'll kill him. So there's a couple different ways to think about it. I guess God could have taken a rib from him as well. Who knows? The narrator is not concerned about answering the question. Okay, the narrator just wants us to see what's going on here, what has happened. And what I find especially interesting, especially significant, is that when Cain doesn't give himself to God, he acts out against his brother. The wrong worship is going to turn into violence towards another. That whenever we withhold ourselves from God, what that's going to eventually end up is not only withholding from God, but turning against others, and especially turning against those who are giving themselves to God. And so we see this connection between kind of the vertical relationships and the horizontal relationships, that when we're not right with God, we're going to do wrong to one another. And when we're doing wrong to one another, we are not right with God. And we see that in the relationship of these first two brothers. Okay, let me erase the board real quick. And just want to talk. So we're talking how to read these stories in Genesis 2 through 4. The creation of the man, the woman from the rib, the serpent talking to the woman, the man listening in, they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, rebelling against God. God speaks a double word to each of them, and then God puts them out of the garden, and God says they become like one of us, knowing good from evil. They can't eat from the tree of life any longer. And then we get Cain and Abel, and then we get Cain worried about somebody's going to kill him, and God giving him this mark. We don't know what that mark is, and Cain getting married and building a city. Okay, so what do we do with this? How do we read this? So there's three basic approaches. So one approach is identified as historical, literal. okay, that this is exactly how it happened. That God started with one man and one woman and built that woman from the rib of the man. And then this couple, the snake was talking to Eve. Well, she wasn't Eve at that point, she was just woman. But the snake, the serpent, was talking to the woman. The man was there. They picked some fruit off of this tree that they weren't supposed to eat from. You get the picture that this is exactly how it happened. We are to take it literally. It historically happened just like this. Okay, and that's one way. A lot of people take that position. Not here to argue against that position, but that's one of the ways that it's taken. Maybe you take it that way. Then there's another position that's kind of at the other end of the board, and I would see this as myth. Now, when we hear the word myth, we usually have negative connotations. We usually think about myth as being something that's made up, something that's not true. Okay, well, in a technical sense, myth doesn't mean that it's not true. Myth means that it expresses, it's a story that's crafted, that's, we might call it fictional, but it's a story that is made up to express a reality. Okay, and so don't think of myths as being simply not true. Think of myths as being stories that are created to express reality. And so some would read Genesis 2 through 4 as mythical in the sense that it's made up. Somebody's been using their imagination. We're going to take the approach inspired by God, imagination inspired by God to express kind of this reality of how God designed things and where we're at now. Okay, and with myth, there's really not a historical basis to it. Okay, so it's not like something happened, like the fall. Rather, these are just stories that express today's reality. Okay, so that's myth. Okay, so fictional, expressing reality, no historical foundation, just a story to explain how things are. Okay, and then historical literal happened just like we read it. Now, a lot of times people think those are your only two options. Okay, but there's actually a middle option, which I find pretty attractive. And the middle option is historical, but not literal. Okay, historical but not literal. You're saying, what do you mean by that? So in this position, there really was a fall. There really was a time when humanity rebelled against God. Now, was there a snake that spoke? Don't know. Probably not. We don't know about talking snakes. And so, but the snake is the lowest creature that we know of. And so, in kind of the imagination of the writer, you don't necessarily have a talking snake as much as you have the snakification of evil. Okay, just like we personify things, Proverbs personifies wisdom so that we have Lady Wisdom. Well, here we have the personification of evil as a snake, a serpent, the lowest of the creatures, so kind of the snakification, if you will. Okay, and was there a single tree in that garden, an actual tree that they were not supposed to eat from? Well, in this view, no, there probably wasn't literally a tree that they were not supposed to eat from, but God did create moral order. So in this view, it's not that there was an actual tree right there that they were told not to eat from. In this view, that tree would be symbolic of moral order, and that they have the temptation to reorder things for themselves to decide, God, we don't like your order, we're going to reorder life in our own terms. And in that sense, they're eating from this tree and transgressing what God commanded. So this view would say historically a fall happened, but maybe not literally like we read, that there's a lot of symbolism in this as a writer has been inspired to try to communicate what happened. And we see kind of the essence of sin, if you will, and the strategy of the devil in terms of convincing us that God is not good, that God is against us, that God is not worthy of our trust, that we must rebel if we are to reach our full potential. So I don't really care which position you take. I'm fine if you take the historical literal. I'm even fine if you take myth. I'm fine if you're here in the middle somewhere in terms of it's historical but not exactly literal, that there's a lot of symbolism going on in the telling of what historically happened. Okay, what I want you to realize, I guess, two things. One, this is kind of a genre question. What am I reading? What kind of literature is it? And we know from the Old Testament as well as the New that God can inspire people to work with all kinds of genres. And so God could inspire people to begin to write and to tell a myth that explains reality. God could inspire somebody to begin to imagine, what historically happened in this imagery of a serpent and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and what is a relationship supposed to be like with the woman, that is to be a rib relationship. Okay, or maybe God inspired somebody with, hey, this is exactly what happened. Okay, nobody's there to write it down, right? So all of this is coming from inspiration, and the writers having to imagine this as they're inspired and as they're looking at life and listening to God. So I don't really care which position you take, but I do care that you acknowledge that God could inspire the writer to write historically literal, to write historical but not literal, a lot of symbolism, or even ahistorical and a myth that kind of explains how things are. So that becomes more important to me, that you recognize that God can use any genre. And then most importantly, that you catch kind of the capital T truth of what we're reading. We talked about the who questions. You're catching the who. Who is God? Who are we? How does sin work? How does temptation work? That you're beginning to wrestle with kind of these larger existential questions, if you will, and the capital T truth that we're confronted with. One more quick little thing. As we will see when we go, what happens in the garden, and especially eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and no longer having access to the tree of life, I think we'll see that as we go, that becomes very much Israel's story. That we're going to discover that God leads Israel into the promised land, and he gives them his Torah, his instruction for how to live through Moses. And so it's like the promised land is a garden. And if they follow God's instruction, Torah, man, that's like the tree of life. And they're going to be blessed, and life in the land will be a garden. But if they decide that they don't want to eat from the tree of life, Torah, and that they want to reorder things, according to what they think is best and according to the nations around them, and they're going to kind of create their own moral order in the land instead of accepting God's moral order, they're going to come under curse, and the land will be cursed, and eventually they'll be banished from the land. So the story of Adam and Eve in the garden is very much the story of Israel in the land. And again, you could say, okay, a coincidence, maybe, but it seems like something's going on there, to where the tellers of this story, Adam and Eve in the land, very much understand Israel to be in that story, that that's their story. And I think in many ways we discover it's our story as well. That when we try to order right and wrong for ourselves, we end up making a mess of things. Anyways, too much preaching, my apologies. Hopefully you have a great weekend, and get out to church in one form or fashion, whether you are watching it online. Hopefully you can be there in person, but get out to church, have a great weekend, and it's pretty hard to have a great weekend without really getting out to church. So God bless, and I will Zoom you on Tuesday from Michigan. And thanks for all your work and for your attention.